This is a super double throwdown useful episode. It is a massive volume of filter and cold air testing, this time on Engine Masters. We're gonna have so much information in this episode, and it applies to anybody using tubing to build a cold air kit or having remote filters. Meaning this applies to off-road guys who've got the snorkel, carbureted guys who are doing a remote filter or building a cold air kit, and especially for anybody who's got an EFI setup that has a front-mounted or side-mounted throttle body. Here's what we're going to do. First of all, we got to find out which filter is big enough. We're going to start with a dinky little filter and find out if that kills power or not. And that's the theme of the whole episode, is what is restrictive, what kills power. We're going to move on to building all sorts of cold air kits using a bunch of bends to see if bends kill power. We're going to try multiple pipe sizes. We're going to try a super standard unit like this that just is a straight 90-degree right out of that front throttle body. We're also gonna test some off-road pre-filters. Do those choke down the filter and kill power? We don't know. Here's the engine that we're testing today. This is a straight out of the box Blueprint Engines LS 6.2. It makes roughly 500 pound-feet of torque and 550 horsepower. Good enough to check all this stuff out. So that's our program. I'm gonna sit down with Brule for a second, and you're gonna have to watch the whole thing here because there is a massive amount of testing. Remember when we did this on a carbureted motor? Uh-huh. I think this is gonna be more interesting.
I had no idea there were that many filters that fit a throttle body.
Yep. Well, that, and I think one of the great things about the show is we've got some budget. Who spends $1,300 on air filters in order to test this stuff?
You spent how much?
$1,300.
I'm telling.
Yeah. No, it's like nobody else gets to test this stuff.
No, and that's part of the advantage that we actually have, is being able to actually go get that stuff and actually be able to test it. I mean, I look through that stuff and I'm like, you've got stuff from tiny and elbows,
stuff you've never seen before.
And that shape, but it's all pretty cool. It's going to be interesting.
That's why you're going to like it. Let's start just with no filter, no nothing, just open throttle body. Really, the worst part of the whole thing is we don't have brother Dulcich with us.
I know, the other Steve is not here, and I look so forward to it.
So yeah, our normal guy, Steve Dulcich, is out on a break, so he'll be back, don't worry. For now, though, it's me and Brulé. This is going to be pretty good.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty normal hopped up 6.2, 550 horsepower, basically 500 pound-feet of torque. It was $499.
Things are pretty amazing for pump gas, 370 inches. I mean, 550 horsepower. We used to fight hard for that.
Ready to start killing it?
I saw them and I'm like, no.
Well, here's the thing. I was talking to your chassis dyno guys. They see this all the time.
You know what I see is that parked right behind the radiator.
Right up against the radiator.
Yeah.
100%. That's why I wanted to do this. This is the very smallest filter I could find at summitracing.com that would fit the throttle body. So I want to cram this on here, and I think what we'll do is we'll just race through all of these and then look at the data later.
I agree.
Yeah.
Sure.
So this is a Spectre.
Okay.
All the rest of them are K&N, so when we get to this point, it's not a test of the actual filter material, it's just going to be size.
Sure.
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah.
Now we're going to go to small size. Now medium. Large. Extra large.
Rapid fire.
That was interesting and not in the way that I had hoped.
Yeah.
Honestly, here's basically what happened. This is our very tiniest filter, even though it does have an open area in it that adds to the overall surface area. This one is 2 3/4 by nearly 6 inches, and this killed only 9 horsepower.
Yeah, surprising.
It was very surprising. And then this K&N, which is a little bit larger, just a little bit taller, did exactly the same thing. Once we got to this medium-sized filter, which is 6 inches by 5 3/8, it made exactly the same power as it did with no filter whatsoever. And because this was capable of flowing enough air, that means that when we added the larger and larger ones, it had no effect. They all made the same power.
My takeaway on this, that the ones that mount right to the throttle body, it's really more about packaging. I mean, it's going to be hard to say this is big enough, this is too small. My take is that you would put the biggest filter you can as far as reasonable packaging, no matter what.
But either way, you're putting it right up against the radiator of the car.
That was my point. I don't like the packaging of this stuff that goes right on the front, but sometimes you're stuck.
Yeah, so the bottom line is all of these are a bad idea because of underhood heat.
Yes.
But the takeaway I had from here is I'm actually shocked that these only killed 9 horsepower.
They're so tiny. I mean, God, you'd have to put at least this on it just because these look like you're
stupid.
a junior.
Yeah. Okay, there's another thing that I want to do on this before we start dealing with piping and things like that. And I want to talk through with you which filter should we use with an off-road pre-filter.
You know, personally, if I were given a choice, I would use the nylon sock simply because I'm not a fan of the oil.
Yeah.
Because it continues to collect and stick. At least with the nylon, if it gets, you know, more or less clogged, it's going to be falling off.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to get a whole lot worse than as bad as it gets. This just can continue to get worse with the oil. It'll turn it into a mud clot, I would think.
Yeah. So which filter do you want to test them on? The medium?
I say we just go with the smallest filter we can and see if there is any restriction with that sock.
All right, we're going to test some off-road pre-filters. First was the nylon sock, now the foam, and I did saturate that thing with oil. Here's an overlay of the filter sock versus the filter foam. As you can see, they're identical, but here's the power numbers. The sock made 494.8 pound-feet and 546.7 horsepower, and then the foam made 496.2 pound-feet and 545.9 horsepower. What we saw is that the loss versus the filter itself, the biggest loss in torque was 4.3, and the biggest loss in horsepower was 3.4, so they don't matter.
No, not much.
So next, I want to start building a cold air kit. So I'm thinking as many 90s and curves and things as we can stack, since that's what it takes to get out the engine and out in front of your radiator. So I've got 3.5-inch pipe and a whole bunch of bends. So let's just make a nightmare and see what happens.
Sounds good.
Okay, next up, nightmare of cold air plumbing. So we put together a mess of 3 90-degree bends and one 120, and we're going to run it with that medium filter, which proved itself on the throttle body to not really kill power.
I call it Mr. Snuffleupagus.
Do you?
Yeah,
That's funny.
I don't want too tight. That's good, actually.
Okay.
Wow, that's got to do something.
Let's hope. If that doesn't kill power, then really what we've learned is nothing matters. All right, let's run it. Now we're doing some damage.
That left a mark.
That left a mark. 486.8 pound-feet of torque and 526 horsepower. Let's look at that overlay to see just how gruesome it is.
What do we compare to?
Medium filter directly on the throttle body.
Ba-boom.
Yikes! Okay, so the black lines are the Snuffleupagus, all of these bends, 390s and a 120, and then the red lines are the same filter here, but directly on the throttle body. So obviously that's hideous. What do we do to start to find out where the problem is?
we're kind of comfortable with the fact that the filter was big enough on the throttle body, so it's the piping causing the problem. Do you think it would do anything by increasing the size of the filter at this point? Or do we just start shortening the piping?
I think we should find out if a larger filter makes a difference.
Yeah, I think we're obligated to do that, just to be sure.
Let's throw the largest one on there just to make a big change.
Get it out of the way.
Find out. Okay,
Yeah,
we're just going to do a quick filter change, put a bigger one on here, and see if that's the difference. Kind of don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it's all the bends, but we have to know.
Yeah.
All right, big filter.
Okay, quick and simple.
Same bends, extra large filter. Okay, the filter didn't matter at all. That was exactly the same. We're gonna go pull off these first two bends and install the filter and find out what it does. Fewer bends, extra large filter. We're trying to narrow down where the actual restriction is that's killing power. Significant. Yeah. Flow is affected by air having to change directions.
Sure. Just like water, ask any plumber what a 90 does.
Let's look how much better it was minus a 90 and a 120.
Boom.
Huge.
That's a couple bends. I wonder how many times a filter gets blamed for that.
Probably. Yeah. So there's the two curves. The red lines obviously are the earlier test where we had more bends in it. Black line, the current configuration. Our new power numbers are 542.8 and 493.8. And really the difference starts all the way down at 3,700 RPM.
Yeah, making a difference everywhere.
It just gets worse and worse and worse. So the question is, where do you want to go from here? I mean, I think we know if we remove another bend, we're just going to see that power keep on creeping closer and closer to
I think we're so close to adequate right now. I think anything that we do, either shorter or bigger, is going to be an improvement. You know, one of the things that we were talking about earlier is I initially, just off the top of my head, thought this was maybe a 102 throttle body, and it's actually a 90. The blade is exactly 3.5 inches, which is the same size pipe we have. Yeah. So we know that the pipe is an adequate size. In theory, I mean, it's the same size as the throttle blade.
Because every foot of it's a restriction.
Oh, no, I'm saying size-wise, just diameter.
Diameter-wise,
but as far as every bend is going to make a difference. So there, in theory, there should be enough diameter there, and we should be able to eliminate bends just to get to that size.
Or I've got 4-inch piping that we can do in this exact same configuration, so we can do A, B, 3.5 pipe to 4-inch pipe.
I actually like your idea better, just simply because now maybe we can overcome the flow loss of the bends with pipe size.
Yeah. So next step, exact same thing, 4-inch pipe.
I'm with you.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good.
All right, let's change pipe. Now we've changed from 3.5 to 4-inch pipe, everything else being equal. That looked like it was really good. I think there's going to be a difference between 3 and 4, but let's find out. We're digging up data. We just ran that 4-inch pipe instead of the 3.5, and it sure looks like it made a difference. Oh, not as much as I thought. I'm fooled by these little dips right there.
Well, you know, when we ran the 3.5 without this, we were at 543 or something.
Yeah, it was
we weren't
pretty
that
close.
far out. We were close. So.
Yeah. Black line's 4-inch pipe, red line's 3.5-inch pipe. Not as much difference as I thought, but there is a difference. Our new peaks, 498 pound-feet of torque and 545 horsepower, which really is the same as no filter at all, or as the filter right on the throttle body.
In reality, it is. And look, you know, it's a great dyno. It's a great piece of equipment. It doesn't surprise me with the barrel drop and the heat and the humidity and all the things that happen throughout the day. We could see 2 or 3 numbers. I mean, that's not completely out of the question. But
it's the same, and imagine the benefit in a car of getting the filter out of the engine compartment.
That's my whole point.
Which is just going to be even more better.
Yeah, that's not the whole story. If you can match the power and get it out in the cool air.
Yeah.
I mean, in the dyno cell, we can put that filter up on the throttle body. It's there. You put the piping on. It's there. It makes the same power. But in a car, being able to do that is huge.
Yeah, here's the thing you might not understand about the dyno cell is that there is quite a wind going through there all the time, fresh air. So even tucking the filter down next to the header, it's getting a lot of airflow. It's not going to mimic what's going on in the car.
Yeah, it really isn't. I mean, header temperature and underhood temperature and all that stuff, radiator temperature, everything that you can do to get that filter out into some fresh air is critical.
Let's talk about the things we've learned just now about bends. I think we know that adding bends is worse. We know that increasing pipe size makes it better just because there's more area. And I say that we're right on the power point where it kind of might make a difference. Like if you had 600 horsepower, I would definitely go with the 4-inch. If you had 300 horsepower, just use the 3.5 or 3.
Yeah, and those are some pretty big swings. I mean, yeah, 3.5 is fine for 300 horsepower. In this kind of package with these power numbers, look, 500 is not uncommon anymore.
I know.
So, you know, kind of what I'm starting to feel like is whatever you can package in there.
Make it big.
Make it as big as you can with the biggest filter you can and package it in the freshest air possible.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to worry about whether you made it or not.
The other thing we have going on here is nice, big, smooth, flowing bends. And the hot trend right now is to make tight bends that are all pie cut. Like they'll do 30 pie cuts in a row, all TIG welded and beautiful and stuff, but it's not that awesome.
It might look good, but I don't think that's really great for flow when you have a short turn like that. Yeah.
But packaging is a real thing in a car, which is why our next step is going to be a 90 right out of the throttle body, over to a straight, over to the filter. All right, I'm going to go get the parts. I look at that as more good news.
I know.
It basically didn't kill power, and that's a super practical way to do things.
I'm surprised, and I think kind of what it shows is it's not so much where the 90s are, it's the fact that there's 90s.
Yeah.
Being right in front of the throttle body doesn't really matter any more than it being down at the filter. That is encouraging because we see a lot of cars like this. Some of them stop right there, kind of next to the radiator against the core support. I've seen some of them that go through the fender well and they're right in front of a front tire. I'm not sure I'm too fond of that with water and
I always wonder about the rain.
Weird. Yeah, I mean, and if a guy never drives it, then I guess, you know, never drives it then. But this is actually pretty practical and pretty real world. I mean, if there's just this much room where you can get that tight 90, you can at least get the filter out from right behind the radiator. It might be beside it and seeing a little heat, but certainly not full flow of the radiator.
And you can add a sweeping 90 and bring it straight forward through the core support. And anything you lose in the 90, you're going to gain from even more cool air.
Yeah, sure.
I learned a lot in this episode. I do have some conclusions written down. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is the wrap up. We sort of hit all these points as we went through the episode, but I would say, first of all, we tested all those filters on the throttle body, but really, we think that's the worst position for them because of heat.
Certainly.
The other thing we found out is that if you're making about 550 horsepower, that 6-inch filter is enough.
When it's on the throttle body. You know, and the filter didn't matter with all the pipes.
Right, we saw no improvement. That was my next point, is that if you've got a whole bunch of pipe, a larger filter isn't going to make up the difference between the restriction and the pipe. And we also learned that bends are absolutely bad, so keep them to a minimum, and if you have to have them, run a larger pipe size. We figured out that if you can package 4-inch pipe, do it. If you're at this power level.
Yeah. But package the biggest stuff you can is kind of my opinion, unless you just don't care and it's kind of an aesthetic thing and it's really just a driver. But if power is your concern, it's hard to know where that line is. So just make it as big as you can, package as much in as you can to the freshest air you can.
Right. And Oh, the other thing I took away, actually, is when we did hard 90 out of the throttle body, I was really happy that that was not a detriment.
Well, it showed me something, too. I mean, it really is more just the fact that it's a 90, not so much where it is, because there was only 190 in that whole business there, and it really performed very well.
And, of course, the last thing we know is that dinnerware works every single time on what? Engine Masters. This time on Engine Masters, the regular old Holley 4150 carburetor versus the speed part with the greatest name ever, the Dominator. I guess this time I'm just gonna have to blatantly come out with it. Yes, I am a carburetor guy, and that's why I was dying to know what makes more power. Given the same CFM rating, do you get more grunt out of a 4150 Holley, the smaller bolt pattern regular carburetor, or the 4500 series Dominator? That's what we're gonna find out here on a couple of different manifolds, and we'll get to all that after this lesson in how it all works. Starting in 1903, when Holley started to produce carburetors, and one of their customers was Ford, and basically both of these modern performance carburetors are linked to Ford. The 4150 series Holley initially was delivered on a 1957 Ford Thunderbird, and it didn't look exactly like this, but the basic modular design of it has become the standard of the performance industry. It's been knocked off by a bunch of manufacturers. It just is the norm. Now, these carburetors come in two series, 4150 that has two metering blocks like this, and 4160, which does not have a secondary metering block. It has a metering plate, and typically those are also center hung float bowls, and they have a crossover tube, although that's not necessary, but there are two different designs of them like that. The key to all of them is that they have this footprint right here for the throttle plate. The bolt pattern is the same on all of them. The thing that is limiting about this carburetor is that you can only fit up to a 1 3/4 inch butterfly in it, all four butterflies at 1 3/4. That's why in 1969, when NASCAR said no more dual quads, Ford came to Holley and they said, we need a solution. That solution was the 4500 series. The big difference in this when it first came out was the footprint. The bolts are way further apart. It's a different pattern. And of course, because there's more real estate here, you can fit bigger throttle bores. Therefore, you can get more airflow, more CFM through the design of the Dominator than you can through the design of the 4150. Now, the other thing about the two different platforms, the 4150 and 4160 versus the Dominator, is that they take different intake manifolds because of that bolt pattern on the throttle plate. So have a look at these right here. This is an Edelbrock 2925 Super Victor for a small block Chevy with a conventional 4150 pattern on it. This one over here is the Super Victor 4500, and you can see that it has a much bigger pad on it, and because of that, it also has a bigger plenum, and often manufacturers will design a 4500 manifold a little bit more racy because they know it's going to be for competition. So in addition to the larger plenum, sometimes they're a little bit taller. The question is, what does it really make a difference? Now, on really high horsepower engines, high RPM, big displacement, we know that the Dominator works better simply because you can buy them in CFMs up to 1450 from Holley. And the problem is you can only get a 4150 small footprint carburetor with an advertised CFM of 1000 CFM, which curiously I don't think really flows 1000 CFM. But I'm not going to be testing airflow in this particular test. I ordered two carburetors that are both rated by Holley at 950 CFM. So we're not going to be testing airflow here. We're going to be testing the design of the two carburetors, perhaps the airflow as it goes across the top of it, and the throttle bore position, as well as the design of the intake manifold. Now let me tell you how we're gonna test all this stuff. See, there's people who have a need to run a Dominator on a smaller flange intake manifold just because it's cool. There are people who need to run a 4150 carburetor because of their racing sanctioning body rules, and they want to do it on a 4500 Dominator intake manifold because maybe that manifold makes more power. So knowing that, here's what our process is going to look like. First up, we're gonna run our 4150 carburetor on our Wilson ported intake manifold. Then we're gonna run that same carburetor with a 1.5-inch spacer to find out what that does to performance, because the adapter that we have to use to run the Dominator on that manifold is 1.5 inches. So the last thing you'll see with that intake manifold is the Dominator on top of that smaller flange intake. A lot of people do this for decorative purposes. Does it kill power because of the restriction? That's what we're gonna find out. So that's with our Wilson manifold. Next, we're going to move on to the Super Victor that is designed for a Dominator carburetor. This has been ported a little bit by Steve Brulé. Often these intakes for a Dominator will come with sort of a clover leaf style right underneath the throttle blades. Well, he took a mill and opened that up for better airflow and just touched it a little bit by hand. So that is not straight out of the box. We are gonna test that first with our Holley XP carburetor bolted directly to the manifold. Now that's unusual because this is that 4150 bolt pattern, but we're able to bolt it to a Dominator intake because the XP series has bolt holes in it that allows that to happen. But it is unusual. Other Holley and Holley design type carburetors won't actually fit. So next up, we're going to be using the adapter under our 4150 to find out what kind of performance that makes. After that, we are going to grab our actual Dominator and run it as nature intended directly on the intake manifold. But since we ran the smaller carburetor with the spacer, we got to find that out too. And so we're going to break out a couple of spacers to stack that up to match the height of the adapter, and finally run the Dominator on the spacer. Now, if you couldn't follow that whole mess, don't worry about it. It's explained in the episode. But the big thing we're gonna learn is that regular Holley better or worse than the fantastic Dominator? And the engine that we're running this all on is also in a prior episode. You can see all the specs on it. For the purposes of what we're doing here, all you really need to know is that it's a 406 small block Chevy and it makes about 550 horsepower. That's gonna be kind of the breakover point where maybe you want to consider using a Dominator. First thing, we're gonna roll the 406 into the dyno cell, install the manifold, and kick it all off with the Holley 4150. I think the one thing we can agree on this test is the Dominator.
Oh, yeah.
Jewelry.
You take great pride in the size of your carburetor there, Freiburger.
I love the Dominator. When I was a kid, this was just the sign that you were legit.
Yeah.
You were serious. You showed up at the street races and some guy had an actual Dominator on his car. Yeah. You were like, whoa. I don't care if it was on a 318 Mopar.
Yeah, whether he needed it or not, as long as he had a Dominator.
It was great. So we're gonna find out if it has any value. Step one is going to be our regular 950 CFM Holley carburetor bolted directly to the intake manifold. That's gonna be our baseline. We've already seen what it does on a prior episode. It's pretty great. Can we improve it with all this other rigmarole? We'll find out. Do what you do best.
I will.
A very solid 570.6 horsepower, and the torque 513.6. Good little motor.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we're gonna do is slap the 1.5-inch spacer underneath the 4150 carb.
I like the idea,
Okay, cool.
and I'll get to it.
All right, we're gonna go make that change and find out what happens in step two. peak power, 572.4, and the peak torque is 518.5 with the spacer on it. And now we're going to compare it to the baseline, and the spacer helped through the mid-range, which is kind of interesting, but not up at the top.
No, normally we're going to see it kind of change here, but it may have enough carburetor on it now that the spacer isn't as effective.
Yeah. Interesting. But I mean, in the end, the only reason that we did that is so that we would have a comparative analysis when we install this adapter and the Dominator. You hiding the Dominator from me?
No, I'm just trying to sneak it off before you notice.
Ah, thank you. Ah, the precious. Well, so far I'm going to say met expectations, but I'm going to look at the data before I open my yap. Our peak power numbers with the Dominator on the adapter are 569 horsepower and 515 pound-feet of torque. And the overlay of the two says that the Dominator was actually a little bit down from the regular 4150 smaller footprint carburetor. And the reason I say that that meets expectations is, first, we have to assume the two carburetors actually flow the same, despite the fact that they've got different Venturian throttle bore sizes, even though the Dominator's got the skirted booster, so it limits it. So if they're the same, then wouldn't you expect moving the throttle bores apart and then restricting them is going to create some sort of a traffic jam?
I don't think we help the shape.
Right.
But we can look at CFM.
CFM, which I think if you look at the curves, you're going to find out it's the same, right? The next plot that we're going to look at here is the data that comes from that air hat on the two carburetors, so we can see how much air is actually moving through them, and as predicted, it follows the power curve. The red here is the 4150 smaller footprint carburetor, and the Dominator is in black.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not all the carburetor. That would be on a bench. What we're doing to it by kind of bringing it down, like I say, I don't think we're helping the shape at all.
Right.
But wouldn't you say that the 4150 had an overall better fuel curve than the Dominator?
We can look at that, and I agree with you. I think it did. The Dominator kind of went from rich to lean, and the 4150 seemed to be a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, right here we're getting it as good as we can with jets,
Yeah, so,
but
I mean, the reality is we're splitting hairs right now.
Similar shape,
it's a little flatter.
It is.
A touch.
It's not much. That's pretty similar between the Dominator in black and the 4150 in red. Now's the point where we have to talk through what we've actually learned on this intake manifold. If you were to use a Dominator that was greater CFM, 1250, on this engine, I don't think that that's gonna matter.
No. I think that the 850, 950, 4150 style carburetors, I think, are more than adequate volume for that engine.
To put a point on a conclusion for what we saw here today with these parts, with two carburetors rated at the CFM that's the same, I would run the smaller 4150 footprint.
No question.
Yeah, there's no reason to spend the extra money for the Dominator and for the adapter just to look arguably a little bit cooler, or maybe not. Agree?
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So there's our conclusion on what we found with the 4150 smaller type intake manifold. Stick with the 4150 carburetor for an engine at this power level. Now we're going to move on and install the Dominator type intake manifold and do it all again and see what happens. Ready for an intake swap?
I'm ready.
Yeah, me too.
Ready for kerplunk? Which is also a little bit like playing Operation, as you set it down square. This is the Edelbrock Super Victor for the 4500 carburetor, as ported a little bit by Steve Brulé.
Onto our Dominator manifold. No adapter required.
Steve already pulled up the graphs here, and the red here is the very first test we did with the Wilson ported manifold and this same 950 small footprint carburetor bolted right to it. And black is what we just did with the same carburetor and the Dominator manifold. And my conclusion is that you are nearly as good of a manifold porter as Wilson.
I think that might be a stretch.
It's a little generous.
Yeah, maybe just a little generous. This manifold has some advantages at wide open, I think.
Yeah, it's a bigger plenum and it has a built-in 1-inch spacer. So I think the important thing to note is that we're not really doing a comparison of the two intake manifolds because one's wildly ported versus this one, which just has some plenum work. This is more about finding out how the carburetors work on each individual intake. Nevertheless, they ended up pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was thinking that the Wilson is smaller volume. I think in general it's a better manifold. It makes a touch more power and it's a lot smaller volume, so it actually has much better flow characteristics than this.
Let's look at what the peak power numbers were with the 4150 on the Dominator manifold, our most recent test. So the peak numbers that we saw with the 950 carb on the Dominator intake manifold are 568 horsepower, and the torque fell into 511.1 pound-feet. So the next thing that I want to do is use the adapter, because even though this carburetor bolts right to the Dominator intake manifold, most 4150s do not. That's unique to the Holley XP. So I want to show you what would happen if you had an older Holley HP or a regular old school 850 double pumper and you wanted to adapt it. So that's what we're going to do next.
Perfect.
Yep. .570 horsepower, 510 pound-feet of torque. How was the AFR curve with that spacer installed? Okay, we're comfortable with that.
Close.
Yeah, didn't change it that much.
No.
So now let's overlay the power. So the black lines there are with the adapter, and he's about to call up no adapter, and it made no difference at all. So when we had the Wilson manifold and we added a spacer to it, it picked up.
Yeah.
But this one didn't because it's already got a spacer built
Already
into
got the
it.
volume there.
Right.
You know.
So you reach a point of diminishing returns, which we're probably already at even before we added that adapter spacer.
Yeah.
So.
But we had to know.
Yeah,
and,
right. No.
Especially because we've got to do the same thing with the Dominator. Next step is when it starts to get good.
Yeah, Dominator.
My friend the Dominator is coming to visit. And that is adios to the 4150 for the remainder of the episode. And like that, we are dominating. I'm depressed.
Wah, wah.
I know. I want to go home now. Well, 569.3 horsepower, 511 pound-feet of torque.
It's
Not
just
what I was
about
hoping
the
for.
same.
Well, I know.
Come
That's
on.
the problem. I wanted the Dominator to be superior.
You know, when the engine's getting all the air it needs,
I know.
it
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, can we look at the overlay in case there's someplace the Dominator wins so that I can, like, at least be perky?
yeah, it won right there.
Okay, it won right there. It lost right there. I gotta tell you, for this engine that doesn't have a lot of RPM or horsepower compression or anything, I would run the 4150.
Yeah.
And here's what's even worse. Here's me saying bad things about the Dominator. They don't drive as good as a 4150. It's much harder to tune it.
I agree 100%. You know, Holly will tell you that the Dominator was designed as a race carburetor, but not anymore, in my opinion. I mean, there's guys with 550 and 60 and 80-inch engines who need that kind of CFM.
Yeah.
So drivability does become a factor.
But the conclusion that I tend to make is that with a 4150 and a 4500, so a regular Holly versus a Dominator of the same CFM, there's no inherent design improvement of the Dominator that makes more power, given that they're flowing the same air.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I always thought that maybe the spacing would be a little different. Maybe that was some benefit there, but apparently not.
Yep, it's simply that the packaging of the larger footprint allows larger throttle bores, which allows more CFM, which is why on big block 540s or whatever, we tend to put a Dominator on there so we can flow 1050, 1150, whatever.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Man, what a disappointment, because they look so cool. It looks so
It
fantastic.
still looks cool.
Yeah. On this particular engine, which again is the bottom range of anything I would consider putting a Dominator on, my package is going to be the Wilson ported intake manifold with the 950 carburetor on the small footprint.
We're looking at 4 to 5 horsepower at peak, and I have to believe that the smaller cross-sectional area of the smaller manifold is going to make it drive better and accelerate better, that we don't really see here when it's actually accelerating through an RPM range or part throttle, those sorts of things. When there's higher airspeed because of less cross-section, I think it's going to be a better choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. It's very combination specific. You can't really get that hard, solid, factual, you have to do this kind of conclusion. But we found out quite a few things that I didn't know.
And that's the thing, is that you never actually know until you test it. And that's what we do every single time on Engine Masters. There's a lot of talk out there these days about what engine components make the best power under boost, whether you're dealing with a supercharger of any kind or a turbocharger. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions. And on this episode, we're gonna find out what the difference is between a cheaper, lower and lower flowing cylinder head and a much higher end, higher flowing cylinder head. And I gotta tell you, we're doing this kind of for my own interest, because everybody says cylinder heads don't matter under boost. Maybe they're not as extreme as that, but they're saying it just doesn't matter as much when you have a blower. Meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, well, if you're trying to cram a whole bunch more air through the engine with boost, then wouldn't you want a cylinder head that's capable of moving all of that air? That's what we're gonna find out here. It's gonna be a direct A and B test with 2 different cylinder heads with the same supercharger and the same drive ratio. Let me tell you how we're gonna do that. First of all, the basic engine. This is our Dart Machinery assembled crate engine. Actually, it came as a short block. It's a Ford Windsor at 363 cubic inches. This is the same architecture as like a 302 Ford with an 8.2-inch deck height, but it's an aftermarket Dart block with a big bore and a stroker kit, which gives us the 363. It's about 10-to-1 compression with the 62cc chambers that we've got in both the cylinder heads that we're going to be testing. The camshaft that's in this is a solid roller custom from Comp Cams. It's the one that we tested in the blower versus regular cam test. The specs at 50 thousandths tap at lift, 244 on the intake, 258 on the exhaust. It's about 600 lift and a lobe separation angle of 113. Up top, we've got an Edelbrock Victor intake manifold, and we'll be running a 750 Holley XP naturally aspirated and a Demon blow-through carburetor with boost. And the boost that we're talking about is coming from our killer ProCharger F1A94, a 1200 horsepower capable blower that we will be tuning down to make neighborhood a 720 for our testing. Now we get into the meat of the cylinder heads. They're both from Dart Machinery. The first set that we're gonna run is right here. These have a 195cc intake port and they are as cast, and likewise, the chambers on them are as cast, not CNC cut at all. So this is going to be sort of the mid-range head for Dart. Not super trick, kind of standard cruising model street head. And we're gonna compare it to a far more radical head, which is the Dart 225cc Pro 1 that is CNC ported and that does have CNC combustion chambers. And so we'll find out what the difference is between those two cylinder heads naturally aspirated, and then we'll do the same thing under boost. So we'll be able to look at the trend NA and the trend boosted, and once again, find out what works better with boost. So the first one up, once again, is gonna be the AsCast 195. Let's roll this thing into the dyno and see what kind of power it makes. Are you super excited?
I'm excited. I don't know about super.
It kind of does what it's expected to do. Honestly, we've seen this engine make more power with some CNC ported heads in the past. These are as cast, and they delivered 433 pound-feet at 5,200 RPM, and the horsepower 488.3 at 6,700 RPM. I don't know where to go from there other than to add a Pro Charger.
I know exactly where to go.
Yeah.
Big belt, big supercharger.
Let's plonk that baby on.
All right, here we go with the Pro Charger. Our changeover here involves three things. First, we're gonna change to a blow-through supercharger Demon carburetor. Second, we're gonna install that Pro Charger centrifugal supercharger. And third, we're gonna send Dulcich in here to retard the ignition timing. And by the way, we're running 116 octane Sunoco fuel in all of this, both NA and blown.
How long we'll have this thing running with boost? What I'm going to do here is retard the timing because we're running boost and it can't tolerate the same timing as NA.
Now it's a party. We're gonna fire it up with Pro Charger Boost. So it's a happy day to the tune of 710 horsepower at 6,900 RPM, and it made 593.9 pound-feet of torque at 5,500 RPM. Look at the nice, happy curve.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful
it's so much
curve.
smoother than it was NA.
Oh, it was kind of kinky and looked way worse than NA. It looks great now.
Let's compare it to NA, just because we can. Always refreshing to see. Of course, the red lines are naturally aspirated, the black lines are under boost. What else would you expect? This is not a shocker.
No.
Let's see what the boost is. There's our boost curve. A dead climb like we always see. The peak boost is 10.9, call it 11 PSI, all the way up at 7,000 RPM. All right, gents, I think we're up for a cylinder head change.
Yeah!
Yay!
So yesterday, it seemed like the Pro Charger went on pretty quick and pretty easy. So I thought it'd be fun this morning just to go ahead and see how quickly we could remove the Pro Charger. I think we can set a record.
Just have to be smooth. Smooth fast. There we go.
That happened in probably less than what? Anybody time it?
2 minutes exactly.
2 minutes. heads that we're installing now are the 225 CNC ported. The other heads were the 195 as cast. So this head has a larger intake port and actually on a flow bench has more flow capacity. So we're hoping for more power, normally aspirated as well as supercharged.
Grandpa Brule is the answer man. He just fixes everything. So what happened is the bolt pattern for the headers on this cylinder head was completely wrong. Me and Troy rifled the giant header pile, could not find the right thing, so finally Brule said, stand back. I've got this handled. He transferred the bolt pattern from the heads onto our old headers, drilled out the flanges, and now Troy's got it installed over here, and we're ready for our A/B test between the 195 as cast heads and the 225 CNC ported heads. Before we get into it, I have something that's been weighing on my mind really badly, and I know I won't sleep tonight. And I can't wait until you actually watch this episode.
Okay.
I called you Grandpa Brule.
I suppose that was a term of endearment.
It was. I said you were the fix-all master.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Well, see, it was a term of endearment.
It was.
So I'm flattered.
So let's have a look at power.
Okay.
Right, we got an increase in both of the power numbers, 521.5 horsepower and 441.4 pound-feet of torque. So that's up on both those peaks.
Oh, that's a huge improvement over what we had.
This doesn't look like it's up to me.
Well, that might not be.
Let's look at the overlay.
I don't think that's a surprise, though, when you go that much bigger in a cylinder head to lose a little bit of bottom end.
The torque kill actually isn't as bad as I thought it would be.
No.
The black lines here are the 225 head and the red lines are the smaller head. And you can see it definitely gives some up. What is the rule about cross-sectional area versus like low-speed torque? Is there any math for that?
Not that I know of. You gauge a good head by how efficient the port is, like how much flow you're getting out of it.
Versus cross-sectional area, right? Isn't theoretically the smallest port that flows the most is the most efficient because of velocity, or is that BS?
There is some math as far as cross-sectional area and horsepower as well, because you can have too much velocity and the port can, they call it going supersonic.
But none of that's happening here.
Not there, no.
It's just a matter of, we guess, it's moving more air faster down here with the smaller port and not up top.
More efficient. Part of what we aren't looking at here either is if the air's moving slower, there's potentially fuel fallout. There's a lot of other things going on other than just air, you know, as far as port efficiency. So it's not a surprise, but it's actually a little, you know, we don't always see that.
No, this is pretty much textbook, if you ask me. I mean, it picked up horsepower with the bigger, presumably higher flowing head, and gave up a little bit of torque at the bottom end.
Yeah, and it's also got a CNC chamber and stuff. It's getting a little bit better action around the valve, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, a good change. I mean, that's a choice that I would make if I was building something I cared about having top end.
When you're buying an aluminum cylinder head for performance, that's what you're looking for.
What you do.
So
I always go to the biggest one. I know it's wrong, but I just, it's like,
me too.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would have started with, is the 225.
Yeah. And wondered if they had a 245.
Right, yeah. Probably not always the best thing, but it's the way I go. So what is the increase there at peak? From 488, 488 to 521.
Yeah.
So the question is, when we put the supercharger on it, will we see an even bigger gap? I always say that's what I'm looking for to find out, is the bigger head better with boost? That means it's got to make a bigger gain than what it did NA.
I'm going to step out this time and say nah.
Really? You're admitting it?
Yeah, it's I think that the boost helps a whole lot of bad cylinder head or less cylinder head.
I think the better head is better with boost.
Okay, well, it isn't a party till there's boost, so let's go whoop it up. We're gonna go in the cell and hang the ProCharger once again to find the final answer if you really need bigger heads with boost. Is that what it was? Bigger is better with boost?
Yeah.
All right, we'll see if Dulcich is right. My favorite Pro charger. Enough jibber jabber. We're going big heads with boost. I have no idea. I wasn't peeking.
I was.
Yeah.
Good. Ooh, big heads with boost. 721.2 horsepower and 602 pound-feet of torque. That's not a massive gain at all.
No.
You win?
Yeah.
Because he said that it matters less with boost. How much less? We got to look at the overlay. Steve's going to pull up the curve that we had with the 195 as cast heads with the blower as compared to these 225 CNC heads with the blower. Not that much.
No.
And now should we look at it NA?
Yeah. I don't know what I don't know. I never know what Dulcich knows.
Looks like I didn't know.
You didn't know.
No.
You said bigger is better with boost, and bigger is not as much better with boost, I don't think.
I mean, it was better, but not that much better.
Interesting. So here's the Steve Brulé science that was in his Dyno brain before we ever started. Look at the difference up at the top end in power between the smaller head in green and the larger head in red. Pretty good gap right here. Now on exactly the same scale, look at the difference between the smaller head in blue and the bigger head in black under boost. And you'll see that the gap is much less. And interestingly, it doesn't diverge as much as this one does. It seems to hang the same from 5,800 all the way up. Okay, so what's interesting about this is it means that what everyone says is true. Heads don't matter with boost, or at least not as much.
At least not as much. I mean, that pretty clearly spells it out right there.
And as we all know, you can fix this change between the big and the small head with another quarter pound of boost.
Absolutely. And you know, like we talk about so much, it really depends on what you're doing and what you want to do. You know, everything matters. It just doesn't matter as much with the blower.
Yeah, if you're going all out for that last horsepower, I guess you do get the bigger head. But what I know now, I would save the money on it and throw a little bit more boost on it.
Yeah, or if you're contemplating stepping up the cylinder head while you're putting your blower on, you might just be barking up the wrong tree with that whole idea.
Maybe.
Right? What about the boost level?
Bingo. What we're curious about here, and we're going to look at it on a graph, is if the boost changed with the bigger head. Theoretically, if there's less restriction in the intake port, if it's flowing more air, maybe it makes less boost. Aha! So the difference in boost all the way up at the top is 1.8 psi. And we've seen this before, putting bigger cams in, changing the intake manifold, bigger cylinder heads, bigger engine, it tends to reduce boost. And in this case, it's making more power at less boost. But let's talk about that, because I think it's an important thing to understand is when you talk about boost, it's a measurement of intake restriction or of airflow restriction.
Yes.
Basically, the blower is trying to cram the air through, and when it's a smaller hole, there's more resistance, so the boost reads bigger. When there's a bigger hole and less resistance, the boost reads smaller, but it's making more horsepower. And the problem is people throw around all the time, oh, how much boost are you making? 7. Oh, you can run that on pump gas, you know, but how much boost are you making? 14? Well, maybe you can run that on pump gas if you've got stock cylinder heads. The question is the pressure difference, you know, what's happening there that's making more power? Is it the same air making it to the cylinder at lower boost?
Well, you could call it pretty close to the same air, but it's less resistance to flow, and thereby less pressure is required to move that air through that port.
And therefore, it's making more power for a bunch of reasons. The air is getting into the cylinder more efficiently, and the blower has got less parasitic drag because it's not working against as much of a load. So that's the big thing. If you're doing that, you're stepping up the engine airflow. A lot of people do that. It's go, oh no, you got to compare it at the same boost level or it's not scientific. I disagree. The pulley ratio on the blower is exactly the same. The only thing that changed is the 2 cylinder heads and the boost dropped and it's making more power. And so if we up the boost, all we're doing is upping the boost.
And we're adding more air through this whole system by upping the boost.
In other words, let's say we put a smaller pulley on. Well, we could have put a smaller pulley on with the other head too. It still would have made more boost with the smaller head than it does with the bigger head.
With the same supercharger, absolutely.
Right, and the same ratio.
Yeah. The engine's more efficient with this head at higher engine speeds.
Which is why it makes less boost.
Yes.
Right.
I just think that's an important and interesting concept to understand.
It is, because it's not that easy.
We did the stupid thing. We put this supercharger that's 1,200 horsepower capable on a stock 350 Chevy. And it was a disaster. Stock cam, stock cylinder heads. What did it make on the chassis dyno?
Oh, around 300 at the wheel?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was worthless.
Yeah,
it was terrible.
Awful.
Because it was making a ton of boost and none of it was doing the engine any good.
No place to go is right, yeah.
Oh, hold on, my phone's ringing. Pro charger? Oh. Okay, yeah, I'll tell the guys. Hang on. They said we're embarrassing them.
What?
They asked me to take the intake tube off and make actual power with this thing.
Good with me.
You want to see where it goes?
Yeah.
I want to go all out with the boost and see how much power this pooch can make. But we do have our answer about cylinder heads. It matters less with boost. Now let's go for the glory run. Look at the swagger on Brule.
Oh, he's just sauntering into this.
I know. I've smashed all the fear out of him.
No fear.
You don't care anymore.
Well, not when it's this easy, you know? I mean, it's just good parts and good stuff, and it's just good fun.
Yeah. Well, I think we made 1,000, but let's have a look at the actual facts. Oh, it didn't capture it. It went 998.7 horsepower. We saw 1,000 horsepower when it was flashing by on the screen. I feel comfortable calling 998.7 1,000 horsepower, and for the record, 759 pound-feet of torque. And what was the boost on that pull? So we made 17.3 PSI, right up there at 6,900. See how it goes flat right on the end of the curve? Yeah. That's very likely belt slip.
Yep.
In fact, it's almost certainly belt slip.
It was good up to there, though.
Yeah, that is what this Pro Charger is meant to do. That's why it was born.
Yeah, this is not a 700 horsepower supercharger. This is, like you say, this is what it's meant to do. We just put things back to where they were normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we took off the restrictions and
plugged that hole that was this big.
Okay. Stuff. This makes me pretty happy. I think we learned a lot about cylinder heads here, and then we had some fun making 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah, 363 cubes, which is ridiculous.
You know what we really should do?
What?
We should change the theme of the show, and we should make 1,000 horsepower on every episode of
Engine Masters.
Got these guys on board with it. Yes.
It feels like we're in a perfect place, hand in hand, through the highs and lows. With you, my love, the feeling grows. We've been through it all, come so far. You're my compass, my shining star. In your arms, I found my home. With you, I'm never alone. We love, we know it's true. This life is better because of you. In every moment, day or night, our love is shining pure and bright. In the sunshine, here we go. With you beside me, love will flow. Every step, every kiss feels like magic, pure like this. We got the world, we got the time. In this love, we always shine. You and me, we're chasing dreams. In this life, we're a perfect team. Through the seasons, through the years, we face the world without fears. Every laugh, every tear only brought us closer, dear. Your love is all I need to see. The way you care, it set me free. This love is strong, it's built to last. Our future's brighter than the past. We know it's true. This life is better because of you. In every moment, day or night, our love is shining pure and bright. Endless sunshine, here we go. With you beside me, love will flow. Every step, every kiss feels like magic. Pure like this, we've got the world, we've got the time. In this love, we always shine. You and me, we're chasing dreams. In this life, we're a perfect team. In this life, we're a perfect team. See the way, love that brightens every day. With you my heart is always full. A love so simple, so beautiful. Endless sunshine, here we go. With you beside me, love will flow. Every step, every kiss feels like magic. Pure like this, we've got the world, we've got the time. In this love we always shine. You and me, we're chasing dreams. In this life, we're a perfect team. You and me, you and me. In this life, we're a perfect team. You and me, you and me, you and me. Endless sunshine, here we go. With you beside me, love will flow. Every step, every kiss feels like magic. Pure like this, we've got the world, we've got the time. In this love, we always shine. You and me, we're chasing dreams. In this life, we're a perfect team. You and me, you and me, you and me.
It's another Engine Masters intake manifold showdown. This time, it is single plane versus single plane and dual plane versus dual plane on a 514 big block Ford. It's another episode for you big block Ford lovers who nag me all the time going, we need more 385 series big blocks on Engine Masters. And here it is. I wanted to do an intake manifold shootout, and I'll tell you this time, it was limited by what was available on the market in the days that we were setting this thing up. I was able to get these 4 intake manifolds, and I'll tell you all about them in detail. And once I knew what I was able to get, I had to fit them into the type of engine that would reasonably be used with these intakes, and it actually ends up perfect because it's right in the middle of the road. See, the bulk of the market, the right down the middle of the road guy, is going to be a street strip unit that could use any one of these intakes, either the high-rise dual plane or the mid-level single plane. Are you going to want to build your thing that runs 6,500 RPM or less and use it in a big old heavy truck, or are you going to use it in a drag car? Well, either way, you're going to have answers out of this episode. You see, the engine that we're going to use is a Ford Motorsport 514 cubic inch crate motor. It's nearly stock. It makes in the neighborhood of 640 to 50 horsepower and 630 to 40 pound-feet of torque, depending on the configuration. It's only 9.8 to 1 compression ratio. In some episodes, you'll see Dulcich and I sort of, I don't know, not ridiculing the thing, but wanting more, wanting our big block Ford to make 750 horsepower, but instead, this is a pump gas, tame, drive it anywhere kind of engine, but it does have a solid roller camshaft, but it doesn't RPM above about 6,000, so it is the perfect player for what we're doing here. Let me tell you specifically what we've got. First of all, on the dual plane side of things, the ones that are going to favor the lower RPM, the more truck-oriented manifolds, are going to be the Edelbrock Performer RPM. This is a high-rise dual plane. I'm going to say that this is significantly better for this application than an Edelbrock Performer, which is a much lower-rise dual plane. The thing is, we also have the Edelbrock RPM air gap intake. The key difference visually, of course, is that this is all cast as one unit, whereas you can pass your hands underneath the intake runners on the air gap. They advertise these as being able to flow cool air under the runners to make more power and potentially have less vapor lock. So that's the story on the dual planes. Then over here on the single planes, interestingly, we have an airflow research intake. Now that is designed specifically for the airflow research bullet cylinder head. And as such, it has sort of a rectangular port, which is differing from the rest of these, which are oval or nearly round. Let me talk to you about what we're using for a cylinder head and how that relates to these intakes. The cylinder heads that we're using on this crate engine were called a Ford Super Cobra Jet. They were designed by John Causey way back in the day, maybe 20 years ago. And these heads have altered valve angles and things that have improved flow, but they also have a much larger port window than you would see in a regular passenger car cylinder head. I can show you that by showing you this. This gasket right here is for a regular 429 or 460 up to about 1987 in a car or truck. This is a Super Cobra Jet intake gasket. Now, if I overlay them here and line them up perfectly, you can see on this side that there is a big difference in the size of the ports. And you can see how it's not only the size, but it's the location as well. And so that's what we're dealing with, are cylinder heads that are this size and 3 intake manifolds that are closer to this size. The important part being that the head is bigger than the intake manifold, and so in no case do we end up having a problem with a step offset in the wrong direction. While the head might be capable of more than some of these intakes are, we're still gonna be able to demonstrate the capabilities of these. So there's our story. We're gonna run all 4 intake manifolds. First, the 2 dual planes. Is it true that the air gap is actually different than the Performer RPM for the big block Ford? I don't know. Can an AFR rectangle port intake make power on a Super Cobra Jet head? I don't know. Can the manifold that was originally delivered with the Ford Motorsport crate engine actually top all of them? I think kinda probably. Let's go. How much do you guys love intake manifold shootouts?
I love them because they're brainless.
Okay.
Brainless? What do you mean brainless?
Well, other than you two looking at them, I mean, I just get to bolt them on, push the handle, and say, here's the numbers.
Power.
Oh, yeah, I guess brainless.
I love them because nobody does like head-to-head comparisons of this stuff, or at least I don't see it anymore.
No.
You know, I get emails every day about guys saying I picked this because I watched the episode.
Yeah, we're gonna have good answers, and this time we're gonna do 2 dual planes and also 2 single planes on the Ford. So our first test is going to be the regular Edelbrock RPM.
Performer RPM is actually their designation.
Right, the Performer RPM. I always call them just RPM, but that's
Me
right.
too.
There's a Performer, and then there's the RPM air gap that we'll get to later on in the episode.
So the first victim's the Performer RPM.
Power results for the Performer RPM intake manifold. We made 636.6 pound-feet of torque at 4,200 RPM, and at 5,700 RPM, we saw 615.7 horsepower.
Pretty good stuff for a little dual plane.
Is it?
I think so.
We were gonna offer it a milk bone, honestly, when you weren't here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were gonna take it for a walk. I guess we're sitting here going, if we had 514 Ford with these heads, honestly, this has 9.8 to 1 compression, so it's low.
Yeah.
It's a street motor, it's a pump gas motor, and it needs another 20 degrees of camshaft. But then we wouldn't really be able to do this story with the dual plane intakes. I think that is what it is. Our next step is to find out if, in fact, the RPM air gap is gonna be better, so we gotta go swap it out. All right, the trick on the big block Ford intake installation is to tuck under the distributor and plug it into the water bypass and then go for the plonk. Straight down. That was pretty good. We just did our intake swap. Now we get to go find out the power of the Edelbrock RPM air gap. And now the results of the RPM air gap intake manifold, 638.6 pound-feet of torque at the same 4,200 RPM. Also the same RPM that we saw with the other manifold up at the horsepower end, 5,700 RPM is 614.8 horsepower. We know nothing until we see the overlay. What? This is unacceptable.
I know you don't like it, but what is the trend that you kind of see there?
I don't like it because it's counter to my preconceived notion. Because I'm telling you, you and I tested the RPM versus the air gap on small block Chevys and saw nothing, which is the danger of drawing a global conclusion over one single test, I will admit. But here's my other thing. Standing here on the counter with both these intake manifolds, the port window at the opening is the same. Measured it with a caliper, measured multiple ones with a caliper. The depth of the plenum on both sides is the same. And visually, there's no difference in the runners at all. But Edelbrock says that the ones in the air gap are bigger, and that would support that.
Yeah, it would kind of tilt that curve just like it's doing.
I mean, to be clear, what we're seeing here is the black lines are going to be the RPM air gap that we just tested, and the red lines are the Performer RPM, the first test. And you can see that the Performer RPM is making a bunch more torque at the bottom end, but when Steve said it tilts the curve, you can see exactly that, because it's the air gap that makes more horsepower at the top end, but
only making more horsepower past peak.
that's an interesting point too, which supports the fact that it is really more airflow. But I'm really surprised at that result.
Yeah,
But you know,
me too.
that's exactly what they said, is it has a larger volume, which, I mean, that's exactly what
But for that to be true, it means that if the plenum's the same and the port mouth is the same, it means that the runner this far between the plenum and the port mouth has to be bigger.
When they say that it's larger, does it give a percentage?
It told me 3.3 square inches total. It doesn't tell me what it is.
You
on
know,
the
in that
smaller
sort of
manifold.
volume in that area, I don't see that as being a big deal. That could be thousands literally on walls and floor and just kind of
Well, yeah.
in general.
and square inches is only a point measurement at a certain position along the runner.
Right.
And usually it's minimum cross-sectional area, and we don't have a data to compare
We don't.
with the other intake manifold, but that would indicate, like Steve said,
Yeah.
a bigger manifold.
It comes back to what you always say every time we test intake manifolds. What is it? You know what you always say.
Oh, you can't tell a thing until you've run it.
Well, you know what? Every episode we test these, I go, the manifold we always recommend is the Edelbrock RPM. And now I have to question what's the difference between the RPM and the air gap, because my knowledge comes from the Chevy mostly. Right, whether I like it or not, the dyno doesn't lie. We have to conclude this time that for low-end power, the Edelbrock RPM is superior to the RPM air gap, but the RPM air gap is going to be better if you have high RPM, bigger camshaft, bigger engine, anything like that.
All of those things.
Fascinating. It's why we do this stuff. And the next thing we're going to do is try the single-plane intake manifolds. The first one up is going to be the airflow research. Next up is going to be our airflow research single plane intake manifold, and I'll remind you that this is a little bit of an unfair deal because this manifold is designed specifically for the airflow research head. And you can see that the port window on it is more rectangular than anything else that we've got here. And if you look at the head, that is a big oval, and that's a rectangle. So I'll just give you a refresher on how this is going to fit. This is the same gasket that we've got on the cylinder head. It fits the port almost perfectly. If I hold it up here to this manifold, manifold, you'll see that the manifold, despite being a rectangle, is not being shrouded by the cylinder head at all. Swoop her in. We're gonna test this with the same Holley HP 950 carburetor that we're using on the other intakes. The HP has slotted base plate bolt holes so that you can bolt them onto a manifold designed for a 4150 Holley with a smaller pattern, or you can bolt it to a manifold that's intended for a 4500 series Holley, which is a Dominator. You have to use a Dominator gasket to do that. So here we go, bolting on our 4150 carb onto our Dominator intake manifold. Our power numbers are at higher RPM points than we saw with the dual plane. For example, we're now looking at a torque peak of 4,400 RPM instead of 4,200, and that peak is 639.6 pound-feet of torque. The horsepower has now jumped up to 6,000 RPM, and it's 628 horsepower. We're gonna compare this to dual-plane intake manifolds, which almost naturally are gonna make more bottom end, but maybe not as much top end. So let's first compare it to the RPM air gap. Textbook difference between a single plane and a dual plane intake manifold. The red lines here are the dual plane air gap, making way more low end torque and less top end. The black lines are the AFR Bullet single plane, making less torque and more horsepower.
Yeah, do you notice that the crossover on the power is right around the peak torque?
Yes, it is, right around peak.
Yeah.
It's 100 RPM lower than peak torque. Let's compare it to the regular Performer RPM, which should actually make more bottom-end beef. The blue lines that we just added are the first intake manifold that we tested. It's the Performer RPM. And you can see it's making even more torque down here, much to my surprise, and just a speck less horsepower up top.
It would certainly be application specific between the single plane and a dual plane. But if I'm going to pick a dual plane, I think I'm going with the Performer RPM. I mean, it picks up enough bottom end. I'm not trading off of that for the bottom end it gains.
And if you don't buy the air gap, you don't lose tools under the intake manifold.
Or bolts.
We call it the bolt gap.
Yeah.
The bolt gap. Everyone knows you always drop stuff down in there, and it always fills with oil and gas for us.
It's a nice catch.
Yeah. To this point, we think that we're going to argue that the Performer RPM, not the air gap, is our favorite dual plane. And as far as the single plane goes right now, it's dealer's choice whether you want low end or whether you want to drag race the thing and RPM it. Our final answer is going to be when we install the final Edelbrock manifold, which is the one that finally has the same size port window and same shape as the cylinder heads. Our final player, the Edelbrock Victor 460 with the Super Cobra Jet port on it. There we go. Once again, the 950 HP 4150. Here's the power numbers. We made 638 pound-feet and 638 horsepower. The torque came in at 4,600 RPM, and our horsepower peak is still landing up at 6,000. That's pretty stout peak numbers from what we've seen so far.
It's all to be seen.
We got to compare it to the Airflow Research Bullet single plane.
This may be the one time where visually the intuition was correct.
Really? Black lines, the Super Cobra Jet intake manifold, the Edelbrock unit, and the red lines are the Airflow Research. And it's weird, the Super Cobra Jet, or the Victor 460, made a bunch more power above peak torque, like above 4,500 RPM, and really it's a trade-off. Why is it that they performed about the same down here and not up there?
You know, the bottom end on this particular manifold actually, I think is exceptional that it did hold on to the bottom end and still made more top end. You know, visually, it's a larger manifold.
The Victor 460, yeah.
So intuition-wise, it's like, okay, it's bigger than the AFR. It's a single plane. Maybe it'll make a little more peak. But I'm impressed that it was able to hold on to the bottom end.
So the Victor 460 ended up making more power than the AFR up top, but is it possible that when we're doing a port offset, meaning the intake manifold is much smaller than the cylinder head, is there any kind of turbulence in that offset that actually slows down airflow?
I guess a flow disruption would be a pretty logical explanation for what we're seeing in the dyno curve up top.
I think part of it might be, too, is where the port is located in the intake manifold versus the intake port. Maybe it's actually entering the air in a not very good area of the intake port itself, where a port that's aligned properly would come right off the floor and have the nice turn. It might be that it's coming off of a wall or something because the port alignment as far as position is not very good.
Interesting. So I bring that up basically to say what we're doing here is not as much an intake manifold shootout on the winner as it is an investigation of what's available on the marketplace and what happens.
Exactly.
And in this case, we think there's a couple of reasons why the AFR is not moving as much air up at the top end as the larger Victor 460.
Well, and in all fairness, we know that that manifold works because we've done the head comparo, and we know that the AFR head and that manifold make better power than this.
Which is a matched team because
Yes.
the AFR head is designed
Yes.
around that same port shape as the intake
So the head
manifold.
can't make better power if the intake manifold won't support it. So
Also a solid conclusion. What I would like to see now is we know that for this combination, the Victor 460 is our favorite single plane, and we know that the Performer RPM is our favorite dual plane. So can we have a look at both? Wow, that's pretty massive, actually. The black lines are the single plane and the red lines are the dual plane. I gotta be honest, there's no way I'm choosing the dual plane on this thing. I can go ahead and give this all up because I'm gonna be making more than 550 pound-feet of torque from the step. So who cares? I want the horsepower.
you know, we talk about this all the time about contouring the engine. There's no special blower cam. It's just that you can give away some bottom end for some top end. And this is kind of the same situation. The engine's big enough that I don't think you need more than 550 pound-feet at the bottom. But you can sure use that at the top.
That's a big difference. You can really see where the airflow starts to lay over on the dual plane. There's no way you disagree with that, right?
No, I mean, you're seeing a textbook example of single plane versus dual plane right here. I mean, it's pretty evenly matched. So if you wanted a lot of low-end torque, for whatever reason, the dual plane's got it.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, application. You're not going to pick the single plane for your pickup truck. You're not going to pick the dual plane for your drag race car.
And that's a clear conclusion for the episode, but there's a couple of other things. We were able to compare two dual planes, two single planes, and dual plane versus single plane. And so our final answer is, I found out that there is a difference between the RPM air gap and the Performer RPM on the Fords. And more RPM, more horsepower, more displacement, you want the air gap. But this benefited with the Performer RPM. That was the light bulb moment for me in the episode.
Yeah, the whole thing is good. I always love these intake manifold tests because we go in presuming we know all of what's going to happen, but we always learn something coming out of it.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I feel more than ever that the things I learned here were not that shootout thing of, oh, this one's the winner. It's more an application thing and some knowledge about what happens with different port shapes and things. So, pretty cool.
Yeah, I liked it.
I really want to build a larger displacement, bigger power Ford big block.
Ford, you know, 600-inch Fords are not out of the question at all.
Super easy in a stock block.
Some of the stuff I've seen with the Fords, some of the builders say, oh, this thing was way easier than building a Chevy.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, it was surprising to me, but it's a possibility.
We'll call that guy because we need to test that junk on a future episode of Engine Masters. But I can't live with myself till we do one more thing.
Let me guess.
Dominator! Last test, we're gonna find out if we can make a few extra horsepower with a Dominator carburetor. Now we're super happy. We just made 649.5 pound-feet of torque and 650.5 horsepower. Let's just say at 600 horsepower, you should probably be looking at a Dominator.
That's why they call it the Dominator,
Isn't
right?
that the greatest name ever conceived for a speed part? I love it.